Hey guys, this is Sukanya Rana and welcome to Streak Initiative. So this week we'll be discussing some prelims related questions from your environment section. And again, before I move on to your questions for the day, make sure to subscribe to Streak Initiative. You can find the link below in the description box. If you register for this particular initiative, you will get all the questions compiled at one place. You will have access to Birding Issues PDF, Yojana and other RSTV videos related PDF. So everything is accessible for free. All you have to do is just register. So let's move on to the environment questions. And the first question of the day is consider the following statements. Number 1, Agaricus is a form of bacteria. And number 2, it represents saprotrophism type of association. And you have to select the correct option. Now in this question, why did I put up this question is a lot of times you must have seen that fungi related or bacteria related, some of these topics have been picked up in your previous year questions, like question on Anabaena, Azolla, other bacterias, blue-green algae, lichens. All these questions have been coming in your paper for a very long time. So these kind of bacteria, fungi and other form of microorganisms becomes very important. So here what we are talking about is Agaricus. Now the answer to this question is actually B. So statement 1 is wrong, statement 2 is right. Agaricus is not a form of bacteria, it is a form of fungi. Now in fact this particular Agaricus is a genus of your mushrooms, right, which can be both edible or poisonous. And it has world over it has 300 members under it, right? So your common like button mushrooms or your field mushrooms and other dominated mushrooms all are present under this set of group, right? So again, Agaricus is not bacteria, it is a form of fungi, so that is why this statement is wrong. So when you know mushrooms, I think the first form of nutrition that you associate it with is saprophytic, right? So saprophytic nutrition is, as you know, it is based upon decayed organic matter, and that is where all your mushrooms grow, right? So by that logic, the statement 2 is right. In fact, because it's a form of fungi, it is a saprophytic type of nutrition system that this particular fungi follows, and that is why statement 2 is right here. So the answer for this question is B. Again, do look into these terms like Cyanobacteria or Azolla, Anabaena. All these terms have been used consistently a lot of time in your prelims. So they become important. Let's move on and look at the second question today. Consider the following statement. The first photosynthetic organism in the evolutionary history of life used reducing agents such as hydrogen and hydrogen sulfide rather than water as a source of electrons in photosynthesis. And the second statement here is that Cyanobacteria produces excess oxygen which contributed directly to the oxygenation of the earth. The question here is that you have to identify the incorrect statement, right? So the basic theme of this question is that it's talking about the initial stages of photosynthesis. Now again, this kind of topic is important because in last few years you've seen a question that has come from the initial stage of atmospheric formation, right? So that kind of questions if are coming. So similarly other themes like first photosynthetic organisms, how did that translate, how oxygen was produced, that is very important. So automatically that area should be covered by you, right? So the statement for the answer for this particular question is actually D, because both the statement are correct here and none of them is incorrect. See, the first photosynthetic organisms, like even before plants, as we know today, who do a lot of green related photosynthesis, earlier we had single-celled lives, right? So single-celled organisms were present in the atmosphere, on the Earth's surface, who survived on the chemicals and not the sunlight. So what they did was they used to burn out hydrogen, methane and sulfur and all these chemical compounds, and through that the idea of nutrition and other things actually evolved, and they started working with that, right? So these were actually anaerobes. When we, the earlier stage of organisms were anaerobes, that they could exist in the environment without the use of oxygen. And then slowly what we had is, slowly we transformed into a new organism called blue-green algae. This is where the cyanobacteria idea of organisms comes into place. And that is when the real photosynthesis, like as we know, the real started there, and they started exhaling oxygen there, right? So cyanobacteria was the one which started producing oxygen, and in fact, these highly reactive gases would actually combine with metals and proteins in the earlier anaerobic cells, like the organisms that were present before cyanobacteria, and they would actually kill them, right? But because the earlier chemical related, they were not able to sustain too much, and we see the rise of cyanobacteria in the environment suddenly, right? So they would turn sunlight into sugar, and they would excrete a lot of oxygen. In fact, when initially we had a lot of cyanobacteria that was multiplied on the surface of the earth, we see that oxygen level actually raised suddenly within 2.5 billion years ago, and this was actually called a great oxidation event, right? So suddenly we see a spike of oxygen in the environment, and that is what it says here, that it produced excess oxygenation, which led to direct oxygenation of the earth. So that is what is the idea here. So these are early stages of development of environment, the development of organisms on the earth's surface, and again the answer for this question is D. None of the statement is wrong. The next question here is, it was actually news. So again, you have to keep a tab on what all new bodies are created and why are they created, at which place are they centered. So all that information is very important. So one such body was there in news, which is your Center for Wetland Conservation and Management. The first statement with respect to is that it will be established as a part of National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management, and second statement is that India's first CWCM has been established in Kolkata. So you have to identify which statement is correct here. So the answer for this particular question is A. Statement 1 is very much right, because see, recently the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change had announced that they're going to establish a Center for Wetland Conservation and Management. And this was announced on the day of World Wetland Day, right? So this will be India's first center for wetland conservation, and it is established in Chennai. So second statement is wrong. It's not established in Kolkata. It is established in Chennai. And in fact, this is going to be part of your NCSCM, which is also actually centered in Chennai. So had you known that this particular body is centered in Chennai, then you could have taken hint that okay, statement 2 would be wrong. So by that logic, you can also solve this question. And this question is again important because wetland is an important topic with respect to your prelims. And if you look at this body right now, which is already existing, the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. So this body has been in news, like if you've read about integrated coastal zone management, right? So those rules were detailed in the last few years. It was in news, right? We had a Shailesh committee also, which had talked about mending this ICCZ's rule. So integrated coastal management thing is actually under this particular body. So all the scientific matters, policy decisions, associated research that is done with respect to coastal management is actually under this body. So that is why this body is also important. And so answer for this particular question is A. Let's move on to your second question. Now, second question is related to Pong Dam Wildlife Sanctuary. Now, all the wildlife sanctuary, national park, tiger reserves are actually very important, and especially if any of these are there in your current affairs, they automatically become very important. So, the first statement with respect to Pong Dam Wildlife Sanctuary is that it is located in River Beas. It is located on River Beas and in the state of Punjab. And second is bar-headed geese is a flagship species in this sanctuary. And the third is that it is known for its flying capacity at extreme altitude, that is height more than 7,000 meters. It is it's talking about that bird, that bar-headed geese, right? So the answer for this particular question, now see, even if you don't know about this particular species like bar-headed geese or anything, you can still attempt this question, because see, when you revise your wildlife sanctuary, it's very important that you know in which state it is. And especially Pong Dam Sanctuary is something that was there in news also, and it is a very famous sanctuary because a lot of migratory birds come here, right? So this particular sanctuary is not there in Punjab, it's in Himachal, right? And if you knew that, I think you can easily eliminate A, C and D, and you easily get the answer B. So it was not necessary to know about the flagship species, but yeah, do have the idea. See, whenever you're revising any important wildlife sanctuary, you should know where it is located, the basic geography, like if there's a river passing by, what is the hills that are nearby that particular sanctuary. You should also be aware about certain flagship species or keystone. Now, there are concepts called flagship species and keystone species. Now, keystone species is a species which is very of primary use, or it is like a key, important element of that particular ecosystem. And that is why that species, like all the survival of that, all the other species is dependent upon that particular species and that ecosystem. Then it's called a keystone species. And flagship species are those species which are like on a verge of extinction, and they are an attractive tool to gain people's attention towards that particular cause. Like we have flagship species like your elephant, Asian elephant, your Bengal tiger, bar-headed geese is one. Right, so these are known as flagship species, and your statement 2 and 3 is very much right. It is a flagship species, and this is also a very good feature about this particular bird. So this is for you, and in fact this particular wildlife sanctuary was in news because a recent annual survey was done with respect to this particular sanctuary, and it was seen that a lot of migratory birds have died in last December, and that is why this particular wildlife sanctuary was in news. So let's look at the last question of the day, which is again on another organism, which is Mandarin duck, and you have to identify the statements which are correct with respect to incorrect with respect to Mandarin duck. So the first statement here is that it is a small exotic bird native to East Asia, and the second statement is that it is very rare to spot and mentioned as critically endangered under the IUCN. So these are the two statements given here. You know, Mandarin duck, if you've seen, it's a very colorful duck. And it's a very beautiful duck, and it was actually first identified by the Swedish botanist known as Carl Linnaeus in 1758, right? So this particular duck, like the name actually suggests, is actually, you know, native to East Asia. So this is native to East Asia, but now a lot of its population has been extended to other regions also. Like it's also found in UK, it's also found in American countries like USA, it's also found there. So the population has actually expanded. So the statement is right here. The first statement is right that it is native to East Asia, but now what we see is there's this expansion of its population across a lot of different places also. The second statement is in fact wrong here, because again, one more thing that you can look into with respect to animals is what is their ranking with respect to IUCN list, right? So that is also another area that you can look into. So this particular duck is not critically endangered. In fact, it comes in the category of least concern. Another thing, you should know whether it's found in India or not. So Mandarin duck is not found in India, because also the migratory route of this particular duck does not fall with India being in that trajectory. Right. So statement 1 is right here. Statement 2 is wrong. This is for your last question of the day. So thank you guys for watching, and all the best for your preparation.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.